Camp's a long ways away, so we'll stay on our toes, and if something presents itself, we'll be able to do that. We can do it financially as well.
For some reason, there's a group of Bears fans that seem to be against the defensive tackle duo that was added in the draft. Even though the last time we had a cover 2 defense with Lovie Smith, drafting 2 early defensive tackles was key to our defense's turnaround. We drafted Tommy Harris and Tank Johnson. They were so good they earned the nickname TNT because together they were dynamite. Going back even further, fans will remember a stellar defensive tackle duo that helped create some great defenses with Ted Washington and Keith Traylor, the Hogs. Completely different style, and they were free agent additions, but beefing up the interior of the defensive line has always been a Bears tradition. In 1985, we had Steve McMichael and Refrigerator Perry beefing up the interior. We even attempted to double down on defensive tackle during another draft more recently with Ego Ferguson and Will Sutton. The defense that Matt Eberflus runs requires pressure from the interior of the defensive line. Another underrated aspect of interior pressure is when the pocket collapses from the inside, it creates even more opportunities for the defensive ends. Even if they lost the rep, they can still be productive. So our defensive ends such as Dominique Robinson, Trevis Gibson, Rasheem Green, and DeMarcus Walker will all benefit from the interior pressure if these rookies can get up to speed quickly. But it's not all about this year. It's about improving the roster overall, and Ryan Poles has accomplished that. The defensive line is much better this week than it was before the draft. Matt Eberflus also has a couple of unique twists to his ideal defense. He likes his Mike linebacker to be interchangeable with his Will linebacker. This makes it harder for defenses to identify the Mike and can cause confusion. He also likes to do the same thing with his 3 techniques. Now, that is ideally. Most of the time in Indy, he was not able to do this because they simply didn't have the talent and they had an elite 3-tech in Will linebacker. In Chicago, he's been able to build this thing from the ground up, brick by brick, step by step, with general manager Ryan Poles. They see things the same way, and Eberflus wanted 2 guys on the interior who could play 3-tech or 1-tech. That's hard to find, but I believe Eberflus and Ryan Poles have accomplished that. I even spoke about this pre-draft with Gervon Dexter. More than a week before we picked him, I said he looks a lot like a 1 technique to most people, but he tested as the 2nd most athletic defensive tackle in the draft. I believe he could play 1-tech or 3-tech. He's that talented. And then we get to Zacch Pickens, who seems to be much more like a prototypical 3-tech, but when you dig deeper on this guy, you see he loves football and plays tenacious against the run. He's not just a 3-tech, and he shows flashes of being able to play the 1-tech spot as well. Now, I will say he needs to get stronger at the NFL level to do this, but he has all the potential in the world, and he has just as much upside as Gervon Dexter. Together, these 2 should form a dynamic duo on the interior of the Chicago Bears defensive line for a long time to come. I want to quickly cover each player and break down their game. I will be following this up with in-depth all 22 videos and more in the coming weeks, but I wanted to give my brief breakdowns on each guy. Today I'm talking about Gervon Dexter and Zacch Pickens. Gervon Dexter Sr. is a freak athlete with massive size that is still filling out his frame. He's nearly 6'6" and 318 pounds. He has over 32-inch arms and ran a 4.88 40-yard dash. He graded out as the 2nd most athletic defensive tackle in the entire draft class and scored a 9.53 on the RAS score. Gervon played mostly 3-tech, but he did move all around Florida's defensive line. He plays physical and flashes violent arm and hand usage at times, but he needs to continue refining his technique. He demanded double teams throughout his career, and he was the leader of the defense and the most talented player on the line. His biggest knock seems to be a lack of burst off the line of scrimmage, but it can be partially explained by his raw technique and that the coaches had him play more of a read and react role on the defense, while the rest of the defensive line fought to get upfield. Basically, they didn't have him burst off the line. They had him wait to see what the play was and then react and make the play. He hasn't missed a game in 3 seasons, and he continued getting better as a pass rusher. He has sky-high potential and could develop into a Pro Bowl player at the next level if he wants to. He's only played football for 5 years, and it shows on film with his inconsistencies, but the upside is incredible. If he continues growing into his massive frame while becoming more refined and consistent, the sky is the limit for Dexter. He has the size and power to play the one tech, but he has the athleticism, arm length, and pass rush ability to be a dominant 3 tech as well. I think he starts off at one tech, but he will play both positions on the line. He is a guy I can tell that Matt Eberflus targeted. He's an agile big man with tons of power and potential. Then we get to Zacch Pickens, who's just a fun player to watch. He played both sides of the ball in high school. He was a defensive tackle and tight end before switching to running back for his senior season and adding nearly 1,000 yards and 22 touchdowns to go with his 87 tackles, 6 sacks, and a pick 6 in the championship game, giving him 23 total touchdowns as a senior. He was a 5-star recruit and rated much higher than last year's #1 overall pick, Gervon. In college, he was an awesome player, but he didn't live up to that billing of being a #1 pick. He was easily the best player on his defense, though, for the last 3 seasons, and was team MVP and team captain. At the Senior Bowl, he played on Luke Getsy's squad and was the Defensive Practice Player of the Week. That's right, polls added the Offensive Player of the Week from Getsy's Senior Bowl squad, which was Darnell Wright, and the Defensive Player of the Week in Zacch Pickens. He had a huge week, and I talked about him various times during the Senior Bowl. He's a 6'3", 298-pound athlete with long 34-plus-inch arms who has awesome agility and athleticism for a guy his size. His burst off the line is incredible, and he makes a living wrecking havoc in opposing backfields. His anchor in the run game is underrated. A lot of scouts view him simply as a guy who shoots gaps, but will get bullied in the run game. I don't believe that to be true. His anchor strength is above average and continues getting better, and his demeanor and use of leverage allows him to fight off double teams and contribute against the run. I think Zacch has the versatility to play 3-tech or 1-tech just like Dexter Gervon. Based purely on his size, play style, and production, I would have Pickens at the 3-tech and Dexter at the nose, but you can mix it up throughout the game to keep defenses on their toes. Pickens occasionally misses a tackle or two and needs to add more variety to his pass rush arsenal, but his swim move is elite. He is a true motor guy who just never stops. He runs to the ball, plays for his teammates, and he loves the game. He's a true gamer and a guy that I believe fans will love. He's also very durable and a 3-year starter, another thing polls seems to value. Both guys started 30-plus straight games in college. Another interesting note, both players faced constant double teams in college and were the best player on their team's respected defensive lines. Both players also played a bit out of position. In my opinion, neither guy was used to their best ability. Pickens was used to maintain gap control and eat double teams way too much, which neutralized his pass rushing upside and held his stats back. He can be much more productive in the NFL. Dexter also is a guy whose best football is in front of him. I also think he could have been more disruptive in college, but his coaches asked him to be the patient man on the defensive line, holding him back to some extent. On top of this dynamic duo, polls also added Travis Bell in the 7th round, who he called his favorite human in the entire draft, another guy with a non-stop motor who will add to this defensive line rotation. I wanted to take a brief moment to stress the importance of an interior pass rush in Matt Eberflus's defense. I think a lot of smart fans get it, and others may be reminded by thinking about what Tommy Harris and Tank Johnson did for us 15 years ago. Without Tommy in the Super Bowl, our defense was not the same. After Tommy's major injury, our defense didn't recover. We need good players on the interior of the defensive line. It's the key to making this defense go. I made multiple articles this offseason talking about the 3-tech position and how it's the cog that makes this defense run. Eberflus calls it the most important position on the defense, and he added not one but two potential difference makers at the position who both have versatility. This is a huge home run by Ryan Poles. I actually found a guy on Twitter who made a YouTube video with the PFF show before the draft and talked about what an awesome combo Zacch Pickens and Gervon Dexter could make. This is before either guy was drafted, and he talks about how he believes Zacch Pickens is a bona fide stud and how him and Gervon Dexter make a perfect pair and would work so well together in the NFL. A few days after he spoke about that, Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles put that plan into action and obviously saw the same thing. The guy's name is Cameron Lynch. I will link the video in the description, and I'll play some snippets from it at the end of this video. I reached out to him on Twitter to see if he wanted to come on for a show and talk about Pickens and Dexter. I haven't heard back yet. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on our new defensive tackle. I myself talked all offseason about needing talent on this defensive line. I felt there was more talent in the draft at defensive end, but the thing that I think some fans are missing is how many defensive ends got drafted. It was a record year for defensive ends with 32 edge rushers drafted. By the time the Bears picked in round 2, there were already 11 defensive ends drafted. Meanwhile, there had only been 4 defensive tackles taken off the board, so Poles was able to grab a top 5 defensive tackle instead of the 12th to 15th best defensive end. He then finished with 2 defensive tackles in nearly every scout's top 10. So he addressed the defensive line, and Eberflus prioritizes the pressure up the middle. It opens up one-on-ones on the outside and causes the quarterback to panic. Poles was asked about the defensive end position, and he said they were aware of the team's weaknesses, and they just couldn't find a guy that was the right fit in the draft. I almost guarantee if Derek Hall had still been on the board, he'd be a Bear. But Poles was then asked if he'd sign a free agent, and he said it's definitely a possibility, but when you watch closely, you see Matt Eberflus can barely hold back a smile. I think another move or two is coming very soon. Yes, defensive end still is a need, but don't let that take away from the new dynamic duo we got on this defensive line. We haven't had 2 D tackles with this much potential since Tommy Harris and Tank Johnson, period. I will have a salary cap and depth chart update tomorrow and have breakdowns on all of our draft picks on the way. I should have my Darnell Wright all 22 out this week as well. I actually am just short on time in the day right now. Wish I could clone myself. Stay tuned. Please remember to hit that like button for me. And until next time, bear down.
Am I talking into these or no? How does this usually work? It's just, okay, I'm talking to y'all basically.
Do a little more to fortify the defensive end position. Is that a fair concern?
Yeah, I think I talked about that before. You know, I think you want to fix everything immediately, but it's got to work the right way. The right players got to be there that fit our scheme. They want to be here, so we can't fix everything at a high level in one swoop. So we are aware of our strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to be opportunistic. That's why we've done what we've done, and we still have flexibility to do what we need to do to improve in different areas. And if that's the area that we improve moving forward, we do. If that doesn't, opportunity doesn't open up, then we'll just continue to what we're doing. But there's also drafts next year, and we've set ourselves up nicely for that too.
You're good going with what you got in the camp if it just ends right here at defensive end, right?
Camp's a long ways away, so we'll stay on our toes, and if something presents itself, we'll be able to do that. We can do it financially as well.
And some of these coaches, I heard from their mouth, they said they build their teams starting with their defensive line. They start with their defensive line, and if the quarterback can't throw the ball, they can't score. And I think a guy like Zacch Pickens, Gervon Dexter Jr., those guys can force havoc, cause havoc in the backfield. And what I have for Zacch Pickens is he's a strong punch, Jake. Strong punch and active hands, high motor. You know, you'll see this guy a lot of times chasing the ball down the line of scrimmage, right? We call it running to the football. A lot of times, defensive linemen, they could save you. Let's say, for example, on a screenplay, as a linebacker, if I'm running to the ball and I overrun it, a lot of times if you have a defensive lineman coming in and hustling to the football, they can force fumbles because the receivers aren't looking for them. They're looking for guys like me that can probably, tackle them, take the ball away. But if a receiver cuts in and gets a lineman that's 291 running a 4.8, like the ball's coming out. And so I can see Zacch just right now at the NFL, some highlights of him dislodging the football from people because of his ability to run to the football. That's just effort. That has nothing to do with his height and weight there. So I just love his effort, and any defensive coordinator is going to love it. I'm raving about it now. So I can just imagine a defensive coordinator just talking about his ability to get to the ball. And then what I talked about with Gervon, I said his get off. It really seemed like it was, as instant and sudden. Guys like
this
Zacch.
guy has it.
There you go. Zacch has it. So Zacch has it. He gets off the football. And, when you have guys that get off the football quickly and the guys that don't, sometimes it works out really well because you can have some pick stunts, right? If a guy can get off the football really quickly like Aaron Donald does, he can get off the football quickly and somebody like Gervon can wrap around. There's different ways that you can work with, different people's abilities. So Zacch Pickens gets off the ball extremely fast. He'll be great on field goal block, right? When you need some points to not be on the board, put him in the game. He might block something for you. And also, too, what I have down here is as an issue sometimes is he does sacrifice his anchor a little bit. Sometimes when you do get off the ball really fast, your pad level may not be where you want it to. So he does get pushed back a little bit, but I'll take that. As quick as he gets off the football, running a 4.8 at 291, I'll take the little knockback as a linebacker. He might be in my lap a little bit, but if you got a guy like Gervon on the other side, impaling an offensive lineman, I can just scrape right over and make the play. So, but Zacch Pickens is my second sleeper at inside defensive line.
What's up, Bears fans? It's Tyree Stevenson here. Excited, ready to get to work. Bear down.
Swifty in the house.